Jarvis, drop my needle.
Hello, this is the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and if you are interested in listening to idiots, you came to the right place. Have a nice day.
Woo! That's an attention getter.
He's a very strange young man.
He's an idiot.
What we're dealing with here is a complete lack of respect for the law.
Oh my God, he's an idiot.
You know, of course, that you're out of your jurisdiction.
Personally, I think you're an idiot.
But that's the evidence in the car.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Always like to keep my audience riveted.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fiends, and welcome once again to Free Range Idiocy, the podcast about everything, but mostly just the stuff we like. It's been 7 hours and 50 days since we last released an episode. That's right, after a prolonged absence from the interwebs, we have returned to claim our throne as the biggest idiots in the podcasting world. Over the last month and a half, there's been a lot of geekery goings-ons that we've missed, so we're going to dive into all kinds of shenanigans, ranging from wrapping up Season 3 of The Mandalorian to the latest in the MCU to the wide world of sports to the wide world of sports entertainment. Can you dig it, sucker? Because it's all right here in this episode 133, Since You've Been Gone, catching up and kicking off Season 4. I am your Uncle Todd, and with me, as always, is the man who spent the last 50 days perfecting his recipe for a brand new steak marinade that could best be described as somewhere between tangy and napalm. He has been my partner in idiocy for over 2 decades and is one purchase away from a free tomahawk ribeye from the steak dealer. I give you the man they call Tim.
Don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years. Greetings and salutations, my friend. How are you?
We've been here for years. Unfortunately, we have not yet done a damn thing worth noticing. That's the problem.
People were like, we thought we had rid ourselves of the virus, but we're back.
Oh, no, we're not a virus. We're more like vermin. They're like, damn, they're like cockroaches. They just won't go away.
I like the Chicago rats. They won't disappear. There we go. There we go. Oh,
and
my
yes,
goodness.
we have the soundboard back up, so we're going to see if that actually works.
Uncle Todd has the soundboard. We're broadcasting with video. We can see each other, which, completely destroys the theater of the mind that we had going for the prior 132 episodes. So we'll see how this one goes. But
theater of the mind.
It's great to see Uncle Todd animated and energetic and projecting. So yes, there we go. Yeah, he's doing a little happy dance there. Very nice. Very nice.
I'm winded from that. That's sad right there.
Just gotta go take a seat and take a breather.
I'm gonna have to finish this episode from a chair, and then eventually I'm gonna be on
show shape.
I've got a couch. I'm gesturing to the man they call Tim. I've got a couch over here. I'm gonna be on it. Anyways,
yes.
It'd be great. But I'm doing well, and yourself, sir.
I'm well. It is. Yeah, it's been a month and a half, and it's been a while. Lots gone on. I think our last episode we were talking Picard season 3, and excited to kind of go through the doings and goings on in the world of geekery, starting with our week in geek. So yeah, I'm excited to get back into it. It's been a while. It's been a while.
It is. I actually did the math. And I know that the maths are not my strong suit, but it actually has been 50 days since when we last released an episode till when this episode will release.
So we're 965 away from tying Roman Reigns' title streak, is what you're telling me.
Sure. If you want to describe it like that, hey, whatever.
I figured.
They only had to come up with a new title because they can't figure out how to get one belt, let alone both belts off of this sucker. I mean, jeez.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Yeah, it's getting interesting in the WWE, let me tell you. But before we get into that, I've been doing. I just realized you asked me a question. I've been doing well. I've been. It's been interesting. I've been to Arizona and back. You've been to Dallas and Atlanta. So we're both well
covering
traveled.
The southern part of the state pretty well. Southern part of the country, I mean.
Oh, man, we need to. One of us needs to get to Oregon. That's what needs to happen. Oregon or Washington, perhaps Wyoming.
I'll fly there just to get the United Silver Premier status, my friend. I need to get out of Group 4. I got to tell you that right now.
The rich keep
group
getting
4.
richer. The rich keep
get
getting
into
richer.
3 at least, or 2. So
Do it.
That's right. That's right.
But anyways,
I'm
let's,
not humble.
you know what?
I'm not humble. So
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to make you do it.
worse than Hulk Hogan.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheiky.
All right. So before we get too much further into this thing and diverge even worse than we have before in our
Soundboard shenanigans.
illustrious history, let's get into a little. I mean, we've got a whole lot of stuff to catch up on, but here's stuff that's a little bit more immediate than the stuff that we have been neglecting for a little thing that we call the Week in Geek. The Week in Geek.
Feels so funky.
What do you have for us for this episode, kind sir?
Well, I've cultivated a couple of items, and Uncle Todd has contributed some as well. But first and foremost, most timely, most recent is apparently Disney shaking up more than just DeSantis.
Are we getting political on this sucker?
No, we're not. We're moving on.
Okay, good.
But they are shaking
Because we're
up
going to alienate
release.
like half of our 9 fans.
Oh,
which is going to be rough for that one fan who has to decide they're going to split like an amoeba.
Oh, good Lord. Disney shaking up their release calendar. And so we thought we'd kind of talk about this a little bit. What I love about this article is, based on the shifts and changes they've made, the article points out in the first paragraph, this is from Variety.com, that at this rate, the 5th trip to Pandora, because apparently we are on a 5-movie bender with Avatar here, the 5th movie will most likely be released in 2031. So... Little did I know that Avatar would be the franchise that would span 3 decades of my life. In some
what you don't
way.
know is Avatar 5 is actually Avatar versus the Smurfs. That's what it's going to be. It's just going to be all blue creatures. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be all blue, baby.
Papa Smurf ain't dealing with this junk no more.
They're going to remix James Brown. It's going to be, instead of Papa Don't Take No Mess, Papa Smurf Don't Take No Mess. And you know what?
Go.
I'm there for that, because that is one of the funkiest songs ever. You drop a Papa Smurf in there, I'm there. I'll do it.
Nice. Absolutely.
Ernest the Cat Miller is going to do the new vocals on it. That's,
He should.
Somebody call my mama.
Just to hit the high points, so there's going to be a live-action Moana that'll be released in June of 2025. Deadpool 3 has been bumped up the roster up to November 8th of 2024. Moved up from November 8th to May 3rd, 2024. There's going to be an untitled Star Wars movie. I don't know if this is the Dave Filoni one, which... I guess it wouldn't be, because that one, I believe, is going to be Heir to the Empire, is what they're calling that. That'll be coming out in 2026. Avatar 3 shifted to 20... Oh, sorry.
That couldn't be the Taika movie, could it? I mean, is that still on? That's awfully quick. I mean, that's like...
I thought so.
In terms of unless that's a very... For a Star Wars or like a sci-fi movie, unless it's very CGI light, that's like literally right around the corner.
Yeah.
when you think about the post-production schedule. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't said it's been canceled, and there hasn't been much talk about it. So yeah, I do wonder if it's just moving forward.
It can't be the Patty Jenkins thing, right? Because that got canceled.
That got canned. Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's not the Patty Jenkins one. So, from the Avatar fans, so Avatar 3 has been shifted to 2025, December of 2025. Avatar 4 is December of 2029, and Avatar 5 is December of 2031. So, based on this timeline, the final Avatar movie will come. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It is not 3 decades; it's 2 decades. 22 years after the original 2009 blockbuster. Still. To me, I'll believe it when I see it. I saw Avatar 2. It was good. I'll admit it. It was a good story, but I don't know how you're getting 5 movies out of this, but whatever.
Well,
what other changes?
Worldwide gross $2.3 billion.
Dr.
I haven't
Evil
seen
is
it
just
yet.
rolling over.
it's one of those weird things. Like Avatar.
You haven't seen Avatar?
I haven't.
Wow.
So here's the thing. Avatar is such a weird thing in that it made all the money.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the highest grossing movies of all time. Sequel, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. But I can't take credit for this take because I read it somewhere or heard it on a podcast or whatever. It has almost no cultural weight. Like who talks about Avatar the same way you talk about Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, even DC has more like cultural weight, cultural mass, if you will, like cultural gravity than Avatar does. Yet it made all the money. It's the weirdest thing. And even now, even after Avatar 2, like really, I have not met anybody who's like, dude, Avatar, so like this and that and the other. Like it's like one of those things that everyone's obligated to see, but yet no one really talks about it afterwards. You know, it's the oddest thing to me. Not that I'm trying to criticize a movie I haven't seen, but it just doesn't. It seems like it's there and then it's done.
Yeah, no, the first one, I mean, not to justify it or anything like that, but the first one was good because it was a unique and interesting take on what I feel is kind of like the Return of the Jedi story with the Ewoks, you know, where you have the underdog, you know, society that is being overtaken by the industrial, you know, the industrial military complex that's basically trying to overtake.
It's the colonizers. Let's just, you know, it's the colonizers.
Fair enough.
Which I mean makes it basically a cross between Fern Gully and Pocahontas.
Well, that's a bit
just
much.
in space.
I mean,
it's not a bit much. Okay. It's kind of the same. Okay, never mind. We don't need...
okay. I point taken. But it was good. To your point, though, it is one of those movies that once you get past, you know, 2009 when it was huge, you know, it doesn't really, like, I wasn't clamoring for Avatar 2. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't something that I was looking forward to. But you know, it's one of those things that I don't know if James Cameron is trying to treat Avatar as if it was a Star Wars like franchise, and I don't believe it is. You know, I to your point, like I don't feel like it's struck a chord culturally. I mean, even though the stories are good, and when I saw Avatar 2, I mean, it was a good story, but it's not the kind of like there's a, how do I say it? It's almost like I'm trying to remember how Bill Simmons would put it in his like sports guy articles, but there's certain movies that just hit a point where if you see it on TV, you know, like Lord of the Rings, if I come across Lord of the Rings on TV, I'm going to sit down and plop down and watch from wherever it is I am to the end of the movie, because it's just one of those movies I just love to watch. Star Wars is the same thing.
Yeah.
Avatar's not that.
Who's the guy?
You know
who
what I
is
mean?
it? Like the guy who it's not Nick Mackay. It's one of those other ESPN guys that went out on his own. It's not Dan Patrick. It's the other guy.
Yeah.
Rich Eisen.
Rich Eisen. Yeah.
I think he referred to it as a remote. Are you serious?
Yes.
How have you not gotten him on the show? You've got connections like that, and here we are swinging out in the wind.
I went to when I first moved out to Chicago, I worked for a company that was doing interactive TV software, and we went to a trade show where there was a lot of TV personalities there, and Rich Eisen was one of them, and I got a signature from him. It's on a VHS tape, which I can no longer play because I have no VHS players in my house. But he signed it because it was basically a VHS tape of all of those. Remember when they used to do all those like This Is Sports Center commercials, and there were all those like goofy comedy bits with them.
Yep.
But I got to meet him, chatted with him. It was during the heyday of Veritech and Tim Wakefield, and you know that era of the Boston Red Sox. So we were chatting Red Sox for a little bit because he asked me who was my team. Great guy. I mean, it was just the coolest thing to talk. I mean, it was so surreal because you're talking to someone who you've only ever seen. Like I was a big Sports Center guy, and so Rich Eisen was always a face on the TV. So it was surreal. But anyways, How did we get to Rich Action from Avatar?
Well, no, because I remember one of the things he was talking about was he was talking about like remote dropper, like that's like you see a movie and you're like the remote just gets dropped. You're not changing the channel, and you're saying that's like Lord of the Rings and stuff for you, but not Avatar. And I would agree because I've only seen the original twice, and I feel like that's even once too many for me. Like I saw the second time so my daughter could see it, and even she has not asked to rewatch it. We've rewatched Star Wars movies,
movie?
but we've Avatar, the original.
Oh, so you have seen it?
Oh, I've seen the original Avatar. I haven't seen Avatar 2.
Oh, sorry. I thought I asked you about the first one, and I thut you said you hadn't seen. Oh, okay. So you have seen Avatar. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I even saw it in the theater. But then, a few years ago when we got Disney, I don't know, it was on Disney Plus, or was it on HBO? It was on one of the streaming services, and I was like, "Oh, you haven't seen Avatar yet? Let's watch that." And we watched it, and I'm like, "All right," and that was a thing. And the funny thing was, like, at that age, I want to say like she was probably like 10, 11. And that's like still at that height of like kids will watch the same movie over and over and over again. Like, like Cars was a once a day watch for us for like months, that sort of thing. She was still at the tail end of that and never asked to watch it again. And as far as I know, has never watched it again. Like that's the sort of thing. Like it's this weird deal where like Avatar just it's there and it makes all the money and everyone's seen it. It's almost like Frampton Comes Alive. Like everybody owns the album who was alive in the 70s and 80s, and yet nobody really brings it up as like one of the top 10 albums of all time, even though it sold approximately 1 trillion copies.
Yeah.
Anyways, I didn't mean to harp on this part of the Disney release calendar. It just
I know. I was going to say, I mean, we have a whole other like slate of movies to go through here, man. But but I'm with you because like as much as I thought Avatar 2 was a good story and a good movie, I just don't know where you're going for 3 more three more movies. It just feels like overkill. It's like do a trilogy and be done with it. It's like why 5? It feels like more of an ego project for Cameron, and he may not even live that long. I mean, James Cameron's getting up there. You know what I mean? Like he's not a good spring chicken anymore.
Dude. You're putting him in the grave. Like you're willing to kill off all the fictional characters, and now you're coming for the real people too. Son of a bitch! Watch out, folks! The Grim Reaper is here.
Oh, good Lord! I think you have something on the soundboard for that.
Let's see here.
Let's see what. There we go. That's right.
Rest in peace. But I think so. Supposedly, like from what I've seen, like it almost feels like now we're getting like a tour of the different peoples of these planets, and now like the next one is going to be fire creatures because we did water this time, and I'm guessing like then there'll be air creatures, and then we tie it all together in some sort. Like it almost seems like it's becoming like a Wikipedia kind of affair. Yeah. Like we're going. And hey, I mean, again, they're going to keep making these until they don't make all the money, and they're still making all the money.
And I'm curious when they're going to get to a point of, because one of the big themes in these movies is, the human invasion, the human colonization that happens because of the poor choices that humanity has made on, our planet Earth. And, I'm kind of hoping that there is more to the antagonist side of things than just the usual, over the top bad guys who are trying to represent the military side of it. I mean, you can't do that for 5 movies. I mean, that just gets old. So I'm hoping Cameron has something a little more up his sleeve than that. So
I don't know how to tell you this, sir, but I think Star Wars is on their 13th movie, and that's kind of like the military bad guys over the top, General Hux, Palpatine. I think
there have been different flavors of it though. Like this is a clear, like in Avatar 2, it's a continuation of the human invasion. You know what I mean? Like what are you going to do that for 3 more movies? I mean, at least with the Imperials, it's been slightly different, riffs on that. The First Order is a riff on the Imperials, right? I mean, it's a different version of them. And quite honestly, when I saw Force Awakens and I saw like the way they portrayed General Hux, who I think is probably one of the most misused characters in that trilogy, I thought they were really trying to build a much scarier version of the Empire in that movie. And then they completely just defanged him in the next two. I mean, I love The Last Jedi, but I hate what they do with Hux because they turn him into a freaking comedy bit than a villain.
Agreed.
So no, I'm with you on that. I know there's beats there, but I just I like. I was thinking about this when I saw Avatar 2, which is like, when are we moving away from the evil colonist bit? Because that's only going to play out for so long. You maybe do one more movie with it, but man, for two more after that, it's like, what the heck is the antagonist at that point? So I don't know. Man, we've gone on for quite some time on Avatar. Should we move on to the Marvel part of this?
Yeah, let's just. Yeah, they're shaking up movies. Schedules are askew.
Now, and don't forget the writer's strike is going on right now, so that's going to impact things even further. Because
did you hear the thing about Ryan Reynolds with Deadpool 3?
No. What?
So there's this thing where now there was an article. I'll have to see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. Apparently, Ryan Reynolds is not allowed to ad lib while they're filming Deadpool 3 because that's in production now.
Wasn't the entire charm of Deadpool?
Yes, but the problem is, if Ryan Reynolds were simply an actor on the movie, he could ad lib all he wants. Ryan Reynolds is listed as a writer for the movie, which puts him. Wow. He'd be writing new material during a strike. So it's a very interesting sort of thing going on. So I'll be curious to see how that whole thing shakes out. Of course, the nice part is that when you think about Deadpool, it's a mask. So they can go in and, hopefully after the writers' strike gets settled, and hopefully the writers get their due, which I think they totally should. And it's valid that they're striking. I'm totally in line with that.
Yeah.
He can go back and he can just ADR to his heart's content afterwards, and it'll be no big thing. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But okay, Deadpool 3, sorry.
No, it's okay. So moving on to Marvel, let's see, what is the reshuffling that is going on there? So Captain America Brave New World is moving to July of 2024. That is in turn delaying Thunderbolts to December 20th, 2024, which once again, I just want to call out Free Range Idiocy, Real and Jabroni brought out the Thunderbolts well before it was ever established it was going to be a movie. So I want to take some credit for that, as should you, Uncle Todd. Blade has been moved to February of 2025, and Fantastic Four moved to May of 2025. Avengers Kang Dynasty is getting pushed back an entire year to from May of 2025 to May of 2026. So we're actually not going to get
that one coming.
Well, and then you have to layer into that the whole like awkwardness that's going on with the guy portraying Kang right now. So, we'll see where that goes. And then what else? Avengers Secret Wars is jumping from May 2026 to May 2027. So, with the addition of, let's see, Star Wars film, it means 2 movies set in a galaxy far, far away will be released in that year. Separate Star Wars movie has been pushed from 2025 2026. Another film is set for 2027. So like we don't really have a sense in the Star Wars world of when Filoni's Heir to the Empire is going to air or come to theaters. To your point, we don't know if this is the Taika Waititi movie that's coming out soon or if it's going to be Heir to the Empire, but we'll have to see. And then what else does this article have? Elsewhere, the new Alien movie produced by Ridley Scott and directed by Fede Alvarez, that'll open on August of 2024. I didn't realize there was a new Alien movie coming. So yeah, so just a lot of shuffling going on in the world of Disney. Everybody shuffling. But anyways, Uncle Todd's busting a move. Look out, folks.
Oh, I put out a hip. Oh God.
Yeah, there it is. The old when Shawn Michaels did the spoof of Hulk Hogan, and he's like doing the flexing, and then he's like, "Oh, my back." That was Uncle Todd. All right. Well, anyways, that's Disney shaking up their release schedule. We also have next item again with Disney and the Plus. a little bit of a purging going on the streaming platform. So this is a little bit of a probably a late story. This is back in May from Collider.com, but Disney is going to be combining with Hulu. Disney Plus will be combining with Hulu at some point in the near future.
I like how you almost called it Hulu. I actually like the name Hulu better than Hulu. I don't know why. It just
Hulu.
It gives it Hulu. It gives it a little extra flair, you know.
You know what Hulu is missing? It's missing the Plus. We need to have Hulu Plus.
You know what? We need Ricardo Montalban, like AI generated. Fine Corinthian leather on the Hulu Plus.
Hulu, from hell's heart I spit at thee.
Yes.
But
and then Shatner, instead of Khan, to be Plus.
There we go.
Oh, come on. Of course, Paramount would have a problem with that, but whatever.
Fantastic. Mainly, this article is getting into the fact that the Plus, all the streaming services are kind of suffering right now. And because of that, I think they are ratcheting down the amount of original content they're generating. They're also taking items that they were offering as part of the streaming service and putting them back in the vault, so to speak. So the Disney Vault, I believe, is becoming a thing again, where they're taking some items off of the slate and putting them away for some later time when they will release them and try to make money on them. So all in all, to say, the Plus trying to cut some costs, but at the same time, just trying to stick it to us all because, can't have everything. Can't have everything.
Well, I mean, this is kind of the fallout of everyone deciding that they're going to have their own streaming service. It went from like Netflix started this kind of ball rolling when they went from DVDs to everything streaming, and then all of a sudden it turned into this Oprah thing where it was like, and you get a streaming service, and you get a streaming service, and you like. And everyone's had to put in all the time. And this with like developing software, developing apps, like, I'm sure some executives like, well, how hard can it be? And meanwhile, guys like you are like, really friggin' hard. Please stop whipping us down in the engine room,
Yep.
Like, I just get a picture of like, the old Ben-Hur movie where they're like beating the drum and everyone's got the oars like, and now it's like everybody's trying to figure out, like, no one stopped to think like, okay, how does this become money?
Right. Yeah.
It was just like build it. And now it's like everyone's
again, the advent of the period we lived through with COVID was just prime for streaming services, right? Because no one's going out to theaters or doing anything in public, so of course they're going to thrive. And now that everyone's going back out into the wild, it's like, oh crap, we're losing subscribers. What's going on here? So,
but even that, I'd say COVID was a double-edged sword because it showed like the value of streaming, but it also completely exposed like, okay, this is not a moneymaker that we thought it was going to be.
Right.
Because then everyone realized like, oh, when we don't have the theaters, when we don't have this, when we don't have that, all of a sudden now we're just relying on this and there's not that much money to be had from this. And how do you really detect what's making money? What's drawing the eyeballs? Like, what was it? The Scorsese movie, The Irishman, which I still haven't seen because I've heard it was just kind of meh. But it's like, everybody talked about like, oh, it's, it had this many viewers. And then like the metrics come out and like it was like 80% of those viewers watched like the first 10 minutes and never finished the movie.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, millions and millions watched the entire movie. Like millions and millions started the movie and then went meh and turned it off. So
one thing
learned, it's not
learned,
surprising that they're trying to pull this, like, do the Disney Vault and stuff, but it's like, how is that going to work? And are they thinking this through, or are they just getting scared in the same way that, it seems like the music industry got scared about, Napster and, the movie studios got scared about home video. Like how much of that is just fear and like knee-jerk reaction? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing I've learned, from the whole experiment of WWE Network, and now that it's moved on to Peacock, is when they first came out, I was like wildly excited by the idea of being able to watch like older just having access to all the older content, like watching the pay-per-views, maybe tapping into a Monday Nitro or Monday Night Raw. Honestly, never done it. So there's a bit of a fallacy around what's called like the long tail content, the content that is like, it's old and it's not relevant. I think there's a small population that probably gets into that, but it's not the moneymaker I think that people thought it would be. Like there isn't there isn't money or money to be made in the idea of you have access to this entire library of content. You know what I mean? It is unfortunately something that, given the busyness, I mean, can't speak for everyone, but given the busyness of my life, I'm watching just a few things usually at night before I go to bed. Like I'm not watching a whole lot of TV. When the weekend comes, I'm out doing stuff. I'm not, or if I am just sitting here, it's, playing, a game to relax sort of thing. So I do think, and that kind of segues nicely into our third Week in Geek item, but
yes,
but yeah, no, I think the streaming services are, something that isn't going to go away, but like you said, I think there's a limit to what they can do from a financial perspective.
Agreed.
So
totally agree.
So, yeah. But transitioning to the gaming theme, and this one comes from Uncle Todd, Star Wars Outlaws was announced a couple days ago, with being highly touted as a game. The trailer came out. It's on the YouTubes. We'll post it in the show notes.
Do it.
But that's right. That's right. Makes you humble. And it's your Huckleberry.
Do it.
Very nice. But
accidentally
this game,
that one. Sorry.
No worries. That game is being highly touted as being, like one of the first Star Wars open world games. And Uncle Todd and I in the pre-production meeting were talking about this because I'm a big fan of Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is it's called an MMORPG. It's a massively multiplayer online, role-playing game. But has a lot of freedom to it. I mean, the way I kind of likened it to Uncle Todd is it's very much like Grand Theft Auto for Star Wars. You have free reign to kind of go where you want to go and do what you want to do. You can play a story mode, but if you so choose, you can work on the planetary stories. You can do, ad hoc, missions that the game provides. But in this game,
would you say it's sort of like Grand Theft Android?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, very nicely done, sir.
Yeah,
nicely done.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the one thing lacking from it, though, and I mentioned this to Uncle Todd, is when you go to places like all. Good God. Oh, folks. There's things that I missed, and there's things that I could not, I could do without,
I got really deep into the Jimmy Dice thing there for a second. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah. But with Old Republic, when you go to Alderaan, you go to Tatooine, that sort of thing, not all the buildings are interactive. There is an element of things being, controlled to some degree. Supposedly, according to this director, you're going to have options, this game director, you're going to have options to engage with things that are just probably considered side things, that are part of the game. And the example he gave is for, if you're in, like, let's say a city and you see a ship fly overhead and go to land, you can actually, engage, run to where that ship lands and engage with that. And there's something that's going to happen there. So I think they've, again, we'll see if it lives up to the hype, but it sounds like it's a game where they're really trying to open up a lot of possibilities, a lot of interaction with things that typically in the past you've not been able to interact with in the more popular Star Wars games. So we'll see. We'll see if it lives up to the hype, but yeah, it looks like a great story. It's basically taking place between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and you are playing a character who is really a thief and is trying to basically function within the underworld of the galaxy. And that's to me, that's kind of a fun area of the universe that's never really been, maybe Book of Boba Fett kind of explored it a little bit, but really the underworld of Star Wars has never really been examined very closely outside of, Book of Boba and maybe Solo. The movie.
I think actually a little bit more. I think a little bit more in Solo than Book of Boba Fett. Even though Book of Boba Fett was supposed to kind of tie into that, I think Solo actually did it better.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. So, So overall, looks like an interesting game. As I mentioned, Uncle Todd, I might need to upgrade my gaming PC rig, so to speak. I have a gaming laptop, and I'm about to max out the resources on said device. So, I think a new gaming PC is in order. So we'll see. We'll see.
I would give you a hard time about your gaming setup, except I would have to ask if this is good for like PlayStation 1 or Atari. So I have no room to give you any shade on this, sir.
Absolutely. Well, and with that, sorry, I didn't ask you. Any thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws? Like, what kind of struck you with the whole thing?
I mean, I think it's a cool concept. I wonder how much freedom you have in it, because and also just how big it is, because if you're talking about worlds and then things on that world, like I was a huge, what was it, Grand Theft Auto 3? What was the breakthrough one where it was,
I think it was 3.
I think it was, yeah, and I was so into that. Like I literally put in like 6 hours a day on that game, just exploring and trying to beat it and all that. And then the next game after that was Vice City, I believe. It was the Miami-based one. Yeah. And the big thing with that was like, oh, and now the game is like 4 or 5 times as big. And it was too big for me. I'm like, I can't keep track of this. And this is, maybe it's just for me. Maybe it's because I'm not meant to be a hardcore gamer, but it was a little bit like, you know, when Madden kind of took a quantum leap forward, and it just hit a point where I'm like, I don't have time to do a scouting report on this. I just want to pull up a game and play. Like I don't want to have to like practice and all this. I just wonder how big that world gets before it's just so big that players are going to lose motivation because there's just so much to do that you're like, I don't even know where to start. And you lose interest after a while because you're like, yeah, it's big, but it's kind of the same old thing over and over again. That's the only thing that I would say is kind of a caution flag.
Yeah, and I struggle with that too with Old Republic, and the other game I play is EVE Online, and there are people. I mean, in EVE Online, that's a really open world kind of game. I mean, to the point where like the economy of it and some of the materials and things that are used in the game are all like player generated. Like I mean, they've done amazing things with that game. A lot of hardcore players, though, they organize themselves into corporations, and these corporations end up, you know, kind of having some of the larger like skirmishes and wars that happen within the galaxy. I don't understand how people do this, like, and hold full-time jobs. Like when I've read about, because I've read about like elements of that game. And to your point, like when you play these open world games, it's like, my God, it's like, how do you invest that much time into it and be able to explore it and then spend time with other games, you know, to your point with Madden, it's almost like, you know, you have like your full-time job, and then, you know, for fun, you play these games. It's like, you have to invest all of your time in one game to get really good at it and to really leverage a lot of the value that it brings. And that's like what I am almost on my gaming laptop. Like I either play EVE Online or I play Old Republic, and maybe I from time to time play Civilization like 6. That's it. I have no other time to do that. You know, like it's just there is no time for any other games, because those are the 3 that kind of, you know, absorb my time. So, until Star Wars Outlaws comes out, and maybe I can play that. But yeah, so I'm excited to see what they're going to do. You know, I'm hopeful, because of the fact they're stressing the open world aspect of it, that it is going to be, you know, maybe revealing some new approaches to, I mean, A, gaming in general, but B, you know, the Star Wars universe as a whole. Back in the early 2000s, there was a big MMORPG called Star Wars Galaxies. And when it first came out, it was really revolutionary, because you literally could, it was a role-playing game. You could choose from a variety of races, and alien races, and you could basically do pretty much whatever you want to do. So if you wanted to go into that game and let's say you settled on a planet and wanted to just open a cantina, that you were able to do that. You could just run a cantina. And if that's all you wanted to do in the game, just make money and run a cantina, you could do it. And fans loved it. They loved the freedom to be able to do what they wanted to do in that world of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Later on, like I think 2-3 years into it, they then switched it over to be very Jedi focused, very kind of leveling up and trying to, really, I don't want to say pigeonhole things into the Jedi, mode, but it went very strongly in that direction with, Force users and lightsabers and things like that. And I think that's when a lot of players fell away from it, and then it kind of died off, I think, in like 07, 08. So there's been games that have tried to do the open world concept before and have been really successful, but I think the problem is, money wise, it may not, similar to the streaming services we talked about, money wise, it may not make sense from a business perspective, because you got to be able to make money on these things. And unfortunately, it just doesn't pan out. So
true.
Anyways, all that being said, looking forward to it. So that, my friends, is the long-awaited month-and-a-half week in Geek.
Well, thank you very much, sir. All right, moving now ahead into other matters. We are actually going to try something a little bit different here. If my phone will work here. We are actually going to go a little, pardon the interruption, a little PTI on this this portion, because we just spent like 30 minutes on the Week in Geek. Once again, Tim just annexing the rest of the show. Eventually, it's going to just be all Week in Geek. I'll have an intro and an outro, and that'll be it. Oh, well, it's the natural order of things. So we're going to actually, since we have, what, 1, 2, 3, we have four, count them, different sections that we're going to cover now. We're going to give them each 15 minutes, and I've got a timer. We will enforce that, and once we hear...
There it is.
That means that time has expired and that subject will rest in peace.
There we go.
So, starting out, subject number 1, and I'm going to start the timer right after I introduce it. We have season 3 of The Mandalorian, which just goes to show how damn long it's been since we recorded, because this feels like half a lifetime ago, sir.
It does. Yeah. I mean, even Picard season 3 is like a lifetime ago.
Oh yeah. It's like, I barely even remember it. So I'll do my best.
Yeah.
But the timer starts now.
All right. Yeah, I'll just jump in with my thoughts. I thought it was a good season. I think what was, kind of what struck me about, the last few episodes, especially the last one, was just how really neat and tidy it was. I mean, they're like we had speculated about, Thrawn potentially appearing. They did show this sort of, shadow council that was forming, that Moff Gideon was a part of, and you saw Captain Pelion for the first time, even though it was in holographic form, which was really cool because, again, that's like the first like live action, heir to the Empire sort of character, that we've seen. But unfortunately it really didn't, pan out that way. It was just, really just kind of a very happy ending to kind of the storyline of Mando and Grogu in a way, I liked how they built up to it in the last couple episodes. It really became kind of a story of Bo-Katan's ascension and almost like restoration to being, leader of the Mandalorians. And then it was Mando kind of, taking Moff Gideon on head on and really kind of, trying to close that chapter. And I say trying, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But yeah, it felt very uncharacteristically, clean the way it ended. And it was a happy ending, but it just felt weird, I was expecting more for some reason, but there's not much of not much of a cliffhanger, is there? No. I mean, very different from season 2. I mean, the whole Luke showing up in the show was just such a mind-blowing experience. Like, you're just like, they're not really doing this, and they did it. It was, and they weren't going to duplicate it. I mean, you can only pull tricks like that once or maybe twice at most. So I knew it wasn't going to be something like that. But the thing that would have blown my mind was just them teasing Thrawn. Like just Thrawn making an appearance and becoming this real part of the live action universe. But when that didn't happen, it was just it felt kind of flat to me a little bit. But at the same time, when you think about how the story started in season 1, it makes sense. There's nothing wrong with the gunslinger and, kind of the adopted child that he's taken on, just having a quiet existence. I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's just not the thing that, as fans, we were kind of hoping for, knowing that Thrawn is coming. So that was my thing. But, I didn't have as much of an issue of, there's an episode where Jack Black, and I'm forgetting her name. She's a musician.
Lizzo.
And Lizzo, thank you. And Christopher Lloyd were part of one of the last couple episodes. I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was actually it was kind of telling or proper that Jack Black was Captain Bombardier or whatever his name was. I mean, that just feels like a very Jack Black kind of character,
Yeah.
But I love that they brought him in. I love Tim Meadows was part of it. I thought that was great to bring him in.
Yes.
I mean, it was fantastic. So I think
if only he could have said perspectives just once. Would that have killed him?
Just to look at the the chips officer of the galaxy and say it's 4:15 a.m. and we're talking perspectives.
Come on.
Yeah, that's a lady.
Yeah, so what you're telling me is you need some people there in the Outer Rim. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Outer Rim, because the latest man knows. Oh, we're talking about space. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not hard to go from the ladies' man into Dusty Rhodes, by the way.
No, I found myself heading that direction. I was about
going to the outer rim. It's hard times in the Outer Rim.
Hard times. You're trying to run a cantina. You're just trying to make your rent. You're just trying to make sure that the pirates don't come. It's hard times. Hard times. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, come out there and he'll straighten things out. I don't know where we're going with this.
Well,
but no, I agree. I think all of those things were. Yeah.
What did you think? Yeah,
I agree with you. In a way, now that there's been, I did feel let down. I can't deny that I felt let down watching getting to the end of the season finale, and none of the things that we were kind of hoping for. The seeing Thrawn or any of those things, or even Ahsoka or whatever. None of those things came to pass. And I did feel let down, but now that I've had some time to think about it, there's been a little bit of room to breathe, which, like we said, in internet years, this feels like it's been about a decade and a half.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I kind of appreciate the fact that they were like, you know what? We, like you say, you can't do a Luke Skywalker season finale every time. That's you get that. Yeah. There's one bullet in that gun and that's it. They fired it.
Mm-hmm.
And damn, I mean, if you're going to fire it, they hit the damn target bullseye on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the fact that they were just like, you know what? No, this is a Western. And if anything, that's kind of like one of the Western endings. Like the gunslinger hangs up his guns and can ride off into the sunset. And this is that version of that. And I appreciated that. The fact they were like, we're not going to try and duplicate it. Because if they had brought out Thrawn, if they teased him, or even if they'd done like the grand intro, it would have been trying to top season 2 or equal it. And you're not going to do that. You're just not. You have a better than average chance with Thrawn just because he's so beloved by a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans. But let's face it, there's a lot of folks who watch Star Wars who wouldn't have any idea who the hell Thrawn was because they haven't read the books.
Yeah.
So it's not going to have the same cachet and weight as Luke Skywalker. I appreciate the fact they went a different direction. I even appreciate the fact that it was this season, and one of the criticisms that was rampant on the interwebs, and one of the reasons why, God, sometimes I want to line up all the Star Wars fans in the world and just do like one big stooge slap, like down the whole line. Like sometimes listening to folks online, I'm like, now I understand why Mo was always so mad. Just the fact that like, oh, well, Mando was like, he was like a supporting character in his own show. Like, shut up. How much were people crying for Bo-Katan, and now we're getting more of that story, more Mandalorian, more, and now you're going to whine about it. Like, I had no problem with that. Like, and let's just address, the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm totally in the bag for Katie Sackhoff, and I would have been fine if it was like The Mandalorian featuring Bo-Katan, and that's the subtitle of the season. I'm okay with it. Fine, bring it on. But I think it was merited.
Yeah, and just to jump in real quick, like I appreciated the fact they didn't spend the entire season with him cleansing himself or whatever he was supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like they knocked that out pretty early in the season. And this season, when you look back on it, is really the restoration of the Mandalorian culture, and people. And I think that's a great story to tell. And
it wasn't Mando's story.
Right. And I'm speaking as someone who's in the long,
but it's not his main story.
Right. And I'm in the long game for Star Wars. Like I love the fact that they're trying to do kind of a Marvel approach to Star Wars where, we get a stretch with Mando. Now we get Bo-Katan. We get the Mandalorians kind of reformed and on their planet. And now where is this going next? Like Thrawn is coming in. We're going to have the Ahsoka series. Who knows if that's going to really be like multiple seasons or not. Maybe it's just a vehicle to tell a story to get us to Heir to the Empire, which I think is going to end up being an Avengers-like movie for Star Wars, where we're going to get the culmination of all the heroes coming together to take on this strategic genius who is unlike anything we've ever really seen in the Star Wars universe, because the Imperials are all stupid. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, no, I thought that was I like the pacing of the season. I think our preconceptions of where it was going, may have clouded our vision a little bit. But, if I stack this against Picard season 3, I think Picard is stronger, but I think this is still a good outing for Mandalorian. It just wasn't maybe as strong or as memorable as season 2 was. And like I said, you can't duplicate that.
Do it.
You
Bingo.
can't. Yeah, I think right on. And you have to take the story where it's going. And in some ways, there was also another story that I read that was like, was this a quiet or a subdued series finale? Like an unannounced series finale? Like, are we now like, is Mandalorian, is Din Djarin being put out to pasture? If it is,
I read there's going to be a season 4. So
and you were doing the stone cold hands, so I that's got to be the truth.
I was a little snug. I'll admit
there. But the thing is, I think and when I first read that, I was like, yeah, totally, it could be. But now that I've again had a little bit more time to think on it, no, actually, it sets up a season 4 that now because everything was leading to like Mando riding off into the sunset. Like there was no more reasons for him to be that guy that he had been. Right. He was running out of those reasons. Season 4 would have to then be, okay, what is the reason to get the gunslinger to come back? Like now we're out of like the Dollars trilogy, We've gotten through the good, the bad, and the ugly, fistful. We've gotten through all those. Okay, now season 4 could be Unforgiven. Like, what does it take to get that guy back? And I don't know. This might not be good for Grogu, because what would it take to get Mando back? I don't know. But that could be a whole other launching point for the next story for this character.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think it was a hell of a series, hell of a season. And, it was an unexpected ending, but I think it was a good one.
Absolutely. And the one disappointment I have is it was either episode 3 or 4 where we saw that exchange where, Bo-Katan and Mando were going back to her castle. They get into an entanglement with some TIE interceptors. They knock them off. There's another wave that comes through. They knock that off, and then there's a third wave that comes through. The way that played out was so Thrawn-esque that to me it and we talked about this in prior episodes. I was so waiting for his debut because I thought he would be the puppet master behind all of that. Like the way that played out is just exactly how Thrawn is in the books, where there's a lot of indirection going on with the way he plays things out. And that's what they showed. And to credit that to Moff Gideon just feels irritating to me because his character isn't him. You know what I mean? Like, Gideon is a good villain, but he never struck me as a wise strategist. He was always being, kind of confounded by Mando. And so I was a little disappointed with that, but setting that aside, we know we're getting Ahsoka in August. We'll get Thrawn then. And, hopefully, however they realize him in live action, lives up to the hype. So we'll see.
I would disagree a little bit. I didn't think it was that uncharacteristic for Gideon, because he again, I mean, even given his shortcomings, and of course he got himself cornered by the coalition of the willing at the end of season 2, but he had managed to outcorner them a few times.
Yeah,
and it was only by the skin of their teeth and some unconventional thinking that they got away. So I kind of appreciate the fact that at this point now we are looking at Moff Gideon as definitely the second most competent Imperial behind Thrawn.
Yeah,
maybe Pelion, I guess. I mean, you kind of give him the nod as like 1A because there's not that many,
right?
But I kind of like the fact that that tease, because I think there's a lot of people who thought, oh yeah, it's got to be Thrawn. No, it's Gideon. Well, he's got to be somewhat competent. He's managed to get to this point.
It was a nice way to whet the appetite. Absolutely.
And I am all for whetting of the appetite.
Absolutely. What was the last thing I was going to mention?
I don't know, but you got 38 seconds.
Give me a moment. So we talked about Thrawn.
You don't got a moment. You got 30 seconds.
I don't know what I was going to say. I thought it was a good season overall.
God, please, no! No!
Oh, man. Yeah, I think it was a good outing, and very hopeful for a Mando season 4. Hopefully, opening up a different story. I think we need to move away from it just being about him and Grogu. And I remember what I was going to say. Read some theories that Moff Gideon getting killed was one of his clones, and so we may see him come back again. Which is ironic given the sound we just heard, because that is the Undertaker's MO. So he does not rest in peace until he cannot function anymore, and now he is resting in peace. So
yes. All right, next up, ladies and gentlemen, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We're not necessarily going in chronological order, because I'm not sure which of the two here of our next subjects have come along, but we will go with Volume 3 first. So, sir, what are your thoughts? Because you saw this a few weeks ago. I just saw it this afternoon.
Yeah, really a pleasure to watch, and a real stark example of great storytelling compared to Ant-Man 3, unfortunately. I really enjoyed it. I liked how they centered the story around Rocket. I like how they, we all knew coming into this was going to be the last Guardians movie, and the fact that they really played up. There was a lot of play up of emotion in the movie, and especially toward the end when they kind of go their separate ways, but yet the Guardians still exist. They're just in a different form. I thought it was really well done, and I thought it was a great continuation of storytelling from going all the way back to Avengers Endgame, where or Avengers Infinity War, where what's her name, Zoe Saldana.
Gamora.
What's her character's
Gamora.
name? Gamora. Thank you. Where Gamora was killed. I think it was great to show the effects of that on on Chris Pratt's character, and I like the fact too that even though there was the other timeline Gamora, they didn't go the route of it being about them getting back together. It was she is just a different person, he's a different person, and he needs to go kind of take care of some things within himself that he hasn't addressed yet. And I thought that was a great theme for the story to have it be about kind of that self-healing. Rocket went through that himself. He finally came to some acceptance of who he was. I thought at the end when he rescues that whole glut of raccoons, as goofy as that may sound, I read an article that even talked about it. Like, his character always didn't want to accept who he was, and then he finally did. And I thought that was a great storytelling device to show his character's growth, in accepting who he is, and also kind of bringing to an end the person who created him. I thought they came up with a great villain who was really just a temporary villain in the context of that story, with the evolutionary, and the fact that he was basically driven mad by the fact that one of his creations was smarter than him and outthought him.
I thought that was a very nice touch.
What's that?
I thought that was a very nice touch of
absolutely
of that being,
yeah. I mean that's what I mean. There was just depth to the storytelling, and I really appreciated that. And that's where Guardians has always kind of blown me away. Is on the surface it seems like something that should have been the weakest link in the Marvel franchise, and yet they come across as some of the deepest storytelling, between Guardians 2 with it being, the father-son dynamic, and then Guardians 3 with the whole interplay between, Rocket and his creator was really well done. I was really surprised by it. So anyways, I've babbled on enough. What did you think, sir?
I think it comes, I agree with your points. I think it comes down to go to your point of being better than Ant-Man 3. Definitely a step up, but it's because of character. The focus on character and the way that these characters have been fleshed out. Even a character like Drax, who is not exactly the deepest of characters, but you don't need to give every character like this in-depth, moments throughout. You just need to give them enough to know who that character is, and to believe that character exists within that universe, and that people actually, and that they care about that character in that universe, that character has, again, going back to that character has some weight in that universe. They take up space. They're not just a cardboard cutout. And even though Drax is not the most important character in all of these movies, his interactions with the other Guardians make you believe that he is part of that team, that he is part of that dynamic. And the characters seem true to themselves, and I've appreciated that, and that's why, to me, it's a better movie than Ant-Man 3, because the thing that doesn't work as well in Ant-Man 3 is the fact that Wasp was never really fleshed out as a character. Hank Pym, I mean, you buy that character mostly because of the actor playing him. Let's face it. If it was anyone else except for Michael Douglas, we'd probably fart all over that character. But because it's Michael Douglas, and Michael Douglas actually does a pretty damn good job with what he's given, you buy him. Michelle Pfeiffer's character, I don't buy as much there, even though, again, I don't think Michelle Pfeiffer did a bad job acting in there. I think she actually did a great job with what she was given, but they didn't give that character all that much. Yeah. And I don't feel that Scott Lang was, I just felt like it was a misuse of those characters going into that whole thing. It wasn't the right story to tell with those. Well, but it wasn't the right story to tell with those.
Very strange ending to it. So sorry.
Yes. And it was also, they were trying to force some of that Ant-Man tone in there where it just wasn't, it wasn't that set of characters. It wasn't that kind of movie, whereas this was very much that kind of movie, because, they'd shown that even though Guardians are goofy and it's very music centric, and it's all these things. But right from the very beginning, that movie demonstrated heart. Right from the start, like it showed you, like, we are going to tug on your heartstrings. Like, this is going to have depth right from the beginning.
There's
when
several
you see
times it was getting a little dusty in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, even
Several
like Guardians
times.
1, like the beginning of that movie is Peter Quill's mom dying.
Yeah.
And him and the whole trauma, and then him getting abducted.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's not how you expect that goofy ass movie to start out. So it sets that tone right away. I thought it was really good. The funny part is, I still don't know what happens pre credits, before Radiohead's Creep starts playing, because I was late to the movie. I was in the middle of a couple things. I made a last minute decision to get to the theater, and then I was delayed.
Dedication to the show, baby.
Not so much dedication, because I was delayed getting into the movie because the theater that I went to see this in has a pizza restaurant attached to the front of the movie theater, and I was trying to sneak in a pizza into the theater. And
only
so
Uncle Todd
I was
would
told
try
by
to
like
pilfer a pizza into the theater. That is fantastic.
And the two teens who were working the snack bar basically would not let me through. Like totally velvet roped me, and I had to go out to my car, put the pizza there. It was still good. Luckily, it was warm enough but yeah, I was thwarted
Couldn't
in my
hide it in
attempts
the jacket or anything. I mean, just couldn't sneak it in.
I don't
that
have
way?
a jacket. It was actually nice out today here in Maine for a change, instead of like 50 degrees and rainy. So I missed that, and then I had to pee so bad after I finished that movie, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be a post-credits scene.
Uncle Todd is a weak bladder.
I think I can manage to get to the bathroom and back before the mid-credit scene, and I missed most of the mid-credit scene. So I was like,
oh gosh.
So I feel like it's kind of an incomplete. But overall, I thought it was a really good movie. It's funny to me, the difference between Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and the Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
And what I'm very curious to see how things will go with the DC universe with James Gunn, with his Kevin Feige hat on
at the helm,
because I thought Guardians 3 was so much better than the Suicide Squad, and it makes me wonder just how much, if an unfettered James Gunn is really going to do the things that we are expecting. So I have a little cautionary tale there and a little kick at DC, because that's what I do. But overall, I thought it was really good. I agree with you on Gamora. I think it was great that they focused on things that way. I got to tell you, I was very uncomfortable for a long period of that movie when we were on the headquarters. That is like everything is like grown, and it's tissue, and everybody's touching things that are like, like they put their hand in the thing, and it's like Jello, and it goes in there, and all the suits are like all squishy and stuff. I'm just like, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with the sounds and the sights of like everything being like, blah, especially like when they're cutting into the thing, and it's like a big old flat.
I thought they did a great job with, kind of communicating not through words, but through imagery and I mean, a little bit through words and emotion, but like that whole scene when Rocket comes back after being augmented and he's talking to his prison mates about how it hurts.
Gosh, that's heartbreaking.
There was something with the way they did that where it really hits you. You know what I mean? Like really feel, even though it's like a fake, this is a fictional character, you feel it, you know what I mean? And you really feel for him. You mentioned
because
Drax
it's a child. It's a child. Right. I mean, it's a sentient talking raccoon child, but it's a child. And if you're a parent, or if you've been around kids, like that idea, like that's all they can tell you is hurts.
Right.
Like that's all they can communicate, because they can't verbalize like why it hurts and how it hurts and the emotional hurt and all that. And oh my gosh, like it hit that point, and I'm like, I don't want to start crying in the theater, and I was hangry anyway. So
I don't know if it's a parental thing or something else, but it just, there was something about it where like it even hit me, and I was just like, man, they did such a great job with that. The other thing too that hit me was you mentioned Drax, and two things. One, I thought it was very apropos. Poor Dave Bautista. I mean, he's pushing 50 at this point, and thankfully they had him wearing like full body uniform, so he doesn't have to walk around, trying to sport the physique anymore. You know what I mean? But what I really like what they did with him in the movie is bringing his character back to his roots of, his whole vengeance against Thanos was because Thanos killed his wife and his daughter, and I thought it was really apropos for his character to be the father figure for that group of children and to know how to communicate with them. And when that happened, I mean, and that was even emotional in a way, because when you think about his character and what his character has been through and what he was, motivated by, how appropriate now that he finds purpose in being that father figure for a whole group of other children. I mean, I thought that was just brilliant storytelling. Like, what a great way to close the loop with him, to bring him into a family setting where he can be a father again, even though it's not, his physical children, but he's now a father, not just to one, but to many, and knows how to relate. I love it when people who are in control of these stories and producing them do it justice and do the characters justice. And like you said, it was character driven, and they stayed true to the characters, and they did a fantastic job. So I really enjoyed it. And not that I don't want to say that it surprised me because I thought it would be bad. It just surprised me in just how much they honored the characters and really brought the story to a great conclusion. And yet, the Guardians go on, they just go on in a different form. And so I thought that was great. So
I agree.
All in on that. How are we doing on time?
We have a minute and a half, but I'm
all right. There we go. We'll Uncle Todd's calling it. He doesn't get that opportunity very often, but when he does, he takes advantage of it.
We've got 90 seconds that we'll be able to spot to another subject if we need to go into a little OT. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about, this one kind of hurts.
Sweet sassy molassy.
The Boston Celtics wilting to the Miami Heat. As Krusty would say, this one was rough. What are your thoughts?
Ironically, we lost power that night. I started watching the game with my son, and they were up by like 10 points, the Celtics, and then the power went out. And we had power out for probably about another 2.5 hours. So when it came back on and it was quarter number 4 and they were down by like 20, I'm like, what the heck happened? But but I want to take this moment not to rant on the Celtics, but I want to rant on some of my neighbors, because almost like as a PSA here for the community of idiots that listen to this. I just want to let you know that when the power goes out, let the power company employees deal with it, please, and do not follow them around. When I was sitting out on my patio, because it was a very nice, comfortable evening for us to sit out on the patio. I'm sitting here and I'm watching, my neighbor to the north of me and neighbors within our townhome association following the energy company employees around, like as if they're going to their presence is somehow going to solve this power outage. I'm like, leave these people alone. Yeah, thank you.
You are worse than Hulk Hogan.
Damn right. Good God. I sat there and I'm like, why are you following them around and pestering them? Leave them alone. Let them do their jobs. The power will come on sooner without you there. Well, anyways, that's what I had to deal with. But when it came back on, here's where I saw kind of warning signs. The prior series when they won and Jason Tatum had that phenomenal game, it was all foundationally based in 3-point shooting. And I am 5'10". I have no place to stand here and preach to people about how basketball should be, because quite frankly, I was a very mediocre player. I did play at some point. I do enjoy the game though, but I enjoy the game because when I watched it back in the 80s, the Boston Celtics team that I watched would penetrate into the paint, and they would force, layups. They would force short, kind of short distance shots. I love Larry Bird doing the 3 points as well, but Larry also shot within, from within the 3-point line. Tatum's, heroics was all based on that 3-point shooting, and that 3-point shooting sadly is inconsistent. If you're going to base your entire offensive strategy on nailing threes, you better have sharpshooters that can hit it 90% of the time every game, and that just isn't realistic. And I think that's what came back to haunt the Celtics. It absolutely drove me nuts. I was out visiting my family in New Hampshire in April. I watched a game with my father. I was cursing the television watching the way that the Celtics lost. They were just shooting threes from all over. Didn't penetrate at all. Just resigned themselves to the 3-point line, and they lost. And the game was within striking distance. They were within 3 to 5 points, but every time they took a three, ended up in a rebound. Opposing team scores. Now it's 7. Now it's 9. Now it's 11. And it drives me nuts. I've seen this with the Bulls too out here, when they had Kirk Heinrich and a glut of other great players, and they played around the perimeter and they didn't try to penetrate. It frustrates me to no end. And so it doesn't surprise me that they lost. I thought it was very cool that they made a comeback. I was hopeful they were going to be the first team to pull the 3-0 kind of comeback story, but unfortunately, I just think I think Tatum unfortunately got injured early in the game with his ankle, and I think they ended up trying to play it more safe than to really kind of take it to the Heat, and so they ended up on the losing end of it. But it was a disappointing loss nonetheless, and it shouldn't have been by as much as it was. But again, when you sit back 20 feet out from the basket and just keep hurling up balls hoping that it's going to go in, what are you going to expect? But what's your thoughts, sir?
So just to recap for our listeners, the man they call Tim,
yes,
big fan of the penetration, and doesn't like it when you just keep throwing up the balls.
That is an appropriate summary, but taken out of context.
My thought is, and I posted this on Facebook the day after, you live by the 3, you die by the 3. Because the problem being, it's not that you have to have the shooters who can hit like 90%. You just have to have a lot of guys who can hit 3-pointers pretty consistently. You need to have a glut of 3-point shooters so that when 1 or 2 of them cools off, you have others who can step in and hit that shot. If you only have a couple, it's like any kind of any of these powerhouse teams for regular season that can make their way through the season, and they can feast off of the lower echelon teams, the weaker teams, and pad their win total, and then they'll get exposed. And you see this in the NFL, especially where it's one and done. You can get exposed really quick for a team that seemed unbeatable in the regular season, but all of a sudden your offense does not work as well when you're in a do or die game and the other team has your number and is a much better defensive team or an offensive team than what you've faced all season. Or if they can just do something really well that you're not as good at. Now, I think it's perfectly warranted that you're a 3-point shooting team, but you also have to be able to do something else. And that goes to your point on penetration. You have to eventually, if you're going to be a 3-point shooting team, great, but you better be able to do at least one other thing, and that has to be either you have to be an absolute stone cold killer shutdown defense when you need to, or you have to be able to, to get a couple people down in the paint and get some points, down and dirty, some mid-range shooting. You need to get some layups. You need to be able to work the ball in, and they just didn't do it.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it was amplified by the fact that, they were missing threes and then the Heat were hitting threes. So now,
Right.
I mean, it's not just a 3-point loss. Now it's a 6-point swing.
Yeah.
Whereas before, at least if you hit a 2, if you're hitting a couple 2s and they're hitting 3s, all right, well, you're only getting, you're only getting knocked off by 1 each time. But when you're at a deficit of 3 each time, you can't, there's nothing you can do there. And, I get like the Tatum's ankle became like the story a millisecond after it happened. That's no excuse. Like you have to be able to do something else. You have to be able to. And unfortunately they were in with a coach who was inexperienced, in over his head. The level of experience of the coach did not match up to the level of experience of the players. And I think he may very well go on to be a very good coach to a great coach, but was not able to get his team to do something else and have a plan in place. He was not Bill Belichick here. He was Mike Martz. He was just gonna push through his idea because he didn't have another one. Unfortunately, that's gonna kick your butt every time.
I'll argue a little bit on, his ability to get them through because they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, that's no small feat. So
I think it's well warranted. What I mean is he wasn't able to get them. He didn't have a backup plan. Like, okay, if we go into this do or die Game 7 elimination game for a chance to get to the NBA Finals, and our 3-pointers are cold, we need to have something else. Like I forget what the guy's name was. Was it like Richards the Third or something like that? Big dude came off the bench and he started getting a couple of those buckets under the basket. He started working it in a little bit. It's like, okay, why wasn't this a thought? Like, why wasn't this plan B? It didn't even feel like there was a plan B watching the game.
Right.
It felt like, okay, if we can't do it this way, well, too bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the merit of an experienced and well tenured coach, is that they're like, okay, I've got plan A that I'm going to focus on, but I've got plan B and I've even got a plan C kind of in my head that if I really need to fall back on something, maybe I can swap that in. It really didn't feel like there was any plan B.
Yeah. And that's fair because I feel like, for what ended up happening, it was interesting. I was chatting with someone at the gym I go to, and I agreed, I agreed with them that whatever ended up happening with that series, whether it was Miami advancing or Boston advancing, they were going to fall to Denver. And we're recording tonight, and I think it was last night or 2 nights ago, Denver, won the NBA championship. Denver was clearly the better team. I don't know that the Celtics would have done better against them, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think, the fact the Heat were able to defeat the Celtics, shows that they were the better team. But clearly, had they advanced and Tatum, injured or not injured, like you said, there's no backup plan, and I think, I got the feeling the team had a scrappiness to them, but there's a point, I think, when scrappiness kind of falls apart, and especially when you're facing a team that, just has, fundamentals and just has, strength in core areas of the game. The teams I enjoy, I know you joked about it, but I'll say it again. I mean, teams that I enjoy watching are teams that take chances and drive it into the hoop. They penetrate into the paint and they try to score 2 points consistently, because in the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to end up giving you, the victory is just putting up points. The more points you put up, the more, the closer you are to winning. You try to sit back and try to just lob up threes and hope for the best. You're sure you might have a great game and land it and win, but unless you have consistency, it's difficult for it to always pan out. So, so it was unfortunate. I had thought the team, given the performance to get to the place where they were in a Game 7, I thought the team could pull it off, but so I was a little surprised by the result. But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, I think it just exposed weaknesses that existed within the Celtics, and they deserve to get bounced by a better team that was more prepared.
I go back to the Bruins when they won the cup now many years ago.
Yep.
And everyone talked about, Claude Julien. Oh, well, he's got a system. He's got a system. He's got a system. And yeah, that system got him a Stanley Cup. However, that system also apparently relied on having the best defensive player in the NHL playing on your team at his peak, and also having a goaltender have one of the all-time great seasons anyone has ever had, and probably the best playoff run that any goaltender has ever had. And hey, if you can have those two things happen every year, you can win. Right. It's like it becomes like, okay, but what is a high percentage, plan? And that's when you look at something like the Patriots. Whether you love it or not, when the Patriots had Brady for that 2001 to 2020-ish run, their method of going about business and their method of going about business with players or even on the field was high percentage. And you can say that by the fact that they played in almost 50% of the Super Bowls during that time. I mean, that's an unreal amount of success. And you can say, oh, well, they lost. It's like, oh, well, yeah, but they were there. Yeah. The 3-point thing is great, except that it is a lower percentage shot. No matter how good your team is at shooting threes, it's never as good as it is at shooting twos. Why? It's closer. Now, that being said, they also just you could tell it wasn't necessarily going to be their night. The point guard's name, who did a hell of a job trying.
Don't remember. Sorry.
Yeah, did a hell of a job trying to pick up the slack from Tatum, and was actually trying to penetrate and get those buckets. Every time he got fouled, man, that never dropped. It was never a chance for a 3-point play, and that just comes down to sometimes it just ain't your night. When those shots are just bouncing out or bouncing off the rim or just not falling, so you don't have a chance of getting Smart? Like that. And no. The other dude, because Marcus was shooting plenty of crappy three. He was definitely doing his job as Antoine Walker version 2.0 in that game. As far as like, would you just get down there and you're not going to hit one? You just drive, would you please? And we're about to run time, but I'm going to go into the 90 seconds here overage. But no, those shots just didn't sink. And that was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're not helping yourself, but this just might not be your night too, because that's a thing that happens.
Yeah. Agreed. The Undertaker is
all right. Yes. Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Now on to our final subject, and this isn't a happy one. No. Although I guess in a way it could be considered happy because, I mean, good Lord, who would have ever pictured this man making it to this point when you consider his career in life? But now we're going to bid a fond farewell. Rest in peace. Respect the legend.
Respect.
The Iron Sheik, ladies and gentlemen.
He make you humble.
Has left us.
He was a punk.
No, he wasn't.
Make you humble.
He make you humble.
Oh,
suplex you, put you in the camel clutch, break your back, make you humble. Yeah. So yes, 81 years old. The Iron Sheik passed away just recently. And again, you think about all those old timers and what they put their bodies through, and especially Sheik.
Yeah.
With that leg that was all funky and messed up, and then of course all of the substances that he did throughout the years. It's kind of like you're like, it's a shame, but that's at least 20 years more than I think anyone had a right to expect. Really, I mean, come on.
Watching the biography about him, the thing that really struck me, because growing up in the 80s, he was such a, when the theater of wrestling was still presented as very real, and he was, playing, basically a in some ways a very, cultural sort of enemy in this Iranian character. really struck me how like the burden of what he must have carried, with playing that character. I don't remember his real name, but the man who played Sergeant Slaughter, had made comments in there about how he legitimately worried about his safety at sometimes because of the fact of how hated he was. He was one of the legit great bad guys because not only of the gimmick he portrayed as, from this country that, had a political beef going on with America, but also the way he just antagonized the crowd, the way he would play up, to all of those like heel tendencies where, whether it's the loaded boot that he had or, the fact that he was able to, just dominate, his opponent with that the way he would apply the camel clutch sometimes, I'm like, man, like, I don't understand how that was like protected or fake. You know what I mean? Like it looked like he was stretching some of the guys like legit. You know what I mean? Like it just
back to like to remember when in Mick Foley's book where he talked about how Harley Race or not Harley Race Terry Funk threw one of the best punches and Mick was in the ring. He's like, oh, finally I'm going to learn the secret of the Terry Funk left hand. And he says he just wound back and whack. He's like, and that's when I realized what this secret was. He just hit me as hard as a human being could possibly hit another human being. And afterwards, he told him, he's like, I thought you were just, what did you do? Like, he's like, oh, Cactus, you just thought I was that good. I can only imagine, like in a way, like Sheik was like, I got to make my money. And if this is going to be you're sore for a couple days afterwards, so be it. Come talk to me, and I'll get the Persian clubs out, and we'll see exactly who's gonna come out on top of this.
But his whole story, like I really appreciated that biography because to understand where he came from, how he left Iran to come to America, how he just embraced, kind of the worst impulses of Americans at the time, to make, to make a living for himself. And, become a world champion out of it. I thought was really, just a great story. And, the way that he just kind of turned that around and, made a career for himself that way, was an impressive story to take in. I think, what I think, gets lost sometimes is, in all the hype of Hogan and the Hogan era of the 80s was the fact of, for every great good guy, you got to have a phenomenal bad guy. And he's always, I shouldn't say he's always kind of left behind and or not thought of, but when everyone gravitates to Hogan and the memories of Hogan as a hero, he sometimes can be forgotten as the guy who kind of got him over because of the fact that he was this, this legit bad guy. I watched, I think it was last week, I watched a video with Mark Henry where he was talking about how he, he took on, the Sheik's challenge of doing the Persian clubs and I mean, those are like 90-pound clubs. And the way, that was something that it was very rare for a wrestler to be able to do or execute, the motions and the exercise with those clubs. Mark Henry was able to do it. And he tells that story because it's like he earned the Sheik's respect, like the Sheik, clearly he, Mark Henry's a, world's strongest man, had the strength and had the capacity to do it. But I think, he tells that story because of the fact that, just the fact he earned the Sheik's respect was a big deal for him. And, and the Sheik did respect him, he talked about how he kicked up those clubs and he went through a few rounds with it and stuff. And the Sheik, bought it and said, yeah, you're legit. A lot of guys have tried that and failed. And it's a testament to, his conditioning and the reality of who he was as an athlete, setting aside the theater of wrestling, he was a legit athlete, and he was someone who was someone who was a real threat, who, could have, put any number of those wrestlers away probably if he wanted to in some way, shape, or form. So, to hear of his loss was certainly, it's a sad thing, from our perspective because of the fact we grew up with him and the fact, we always reference him in the show, but he's also just such an iconic villain. And I know when we did our brackets, he didn't make it to the finals, but he was an iconic villain, and he will go down in history as one of the best villains in all of wrestling.
Yeah. And the fact that like this kind of the guy coming along at the perfect time, like the man for that season, just as the Iran hostages are happening, and here comes this guy who is a legit guy from Tehran, Iran, and and is the bad guy. Oh my gosh. And but the fact that you have this guy who's the heel, he's the bad guy. And yet he is living the American dream. He is kind of the embodiment of the American dream of coming here and making a life for himself. And a dude who, by all indications, love this country, which is it's kind of one of those little bits of irony that I really appreciate about professional wrestling. And when you start learning the behind the scenes stuff, and you're like, oh wow, that's kind of cool that that's a thing. And was also like, and I know it wasn't him all the time. It was a great follow on Twitter. As he would have probably said, Mark Henry is the real.
Lifelong feud with Hogan.
Oh my gosh.
You are worse than Hulk Hogan.
I mean,
you know what? The
man found a way to work Hulk Hogan into anything. You know what I mean? Like any event he would comment on, he would work Hulk Hogan into it.
Yeah, and now the more that Hulk Hogan has opened his mouth over the years, the more that we're like, you know what? Sheik might have had this one nailed a long time
might
before
have been
all
onto
of us.
something there.
Because apparently I saw there was a thing on WrestleMania where they were talking about, how some wrestlers are upset with Hulk Hogan. I'm like, oh, gee, I wonder what it's about now. What did he fart out of his mouth hole now? And apparently he talked about, he kind of bemoaned the fact that back in the day, back in the day when, wrestlers were, men were men and so were the women, I guess, as Jim Cornette would say, how the wrestlers were bigger, and all this. And he said, I wasn't, I was 300 pounds and I was kind of a medium guy. And I'm just like, well, yeah, Hulk, because, they can't all like afford the steroids that you used to put yourself on, But yeah, Sheik was one of those guys. Like he was instantly buyable as a bad guy. You didn't even have to open his mouth.
Crowd.
My gosh!
Like watching that biography and seeing some of the clips of him working the crowd, it's like, God, it was a freaking masterclass in how to be a good wrestling heel. My God.
Oh, and there was that story that Jim Cornette tells where he was working somewhere. I think he was in Kentucky, and he talked about how he was working. Cornette had to fill in as the ring announcer, and I guess the athletic commissioner in Louisville or wherever was very strict. Like, didn't get that wrestling was a work. He thought it was was trying to treat it as legit and all this. So it was like there was a very strict rule about no one but the ring announcer could be on the house microphone. And so they had Sheik is coming down, and Sheik is going to do his Iran #1 USA Hatui sort of thing, and Jim's like trying to tell him, he's like, Sheik, you can't get on the microphone. He's like trying to grab the microphone away from me. He's like, so Cornette and Sheik are wrestling around for the microphone. And at one point, Cornette's trying to tell him, he's like, Sheik, you can't get on the mic. The commissioner won't let you go and get on the microphone. And Sheik manages to pull the microphone close to him, and at that moment goes, F the commissioner. over the house, Mike. And Cornette's like, I'm dead. And apparently afterwards, the guy was hot, and he's like, look at him. I can't. What am I gonna do?
Right.
I tried. Right. Oh my gosh! Right. But so many stories with the Sheik. Like even Mick Foley talking about like catching a ride on like one of those little golf carts in the airport. that usually has like a beep, beep, beep. He's not with a Sheikah board. She could be like, get out of the way. What are you, deaf? Get out of the way, you jabroni. Oh my gosh. What a character. What an absolute character. Like someone who lived their gimmick.
Yes.
Yes.
Adopted and like adopted member and a spokesperson, if you will, of the free range idiocy congregation, the Iron Sheik.
Yes, he didn't know it, but he was always with us in spirit.
Absolutely. May he rest in peace.
Make him humble. Make him humble.
Indeed.
You are worse than Hulk Hogan.
You are. Love it.
All right. Well, I guess that is it for that.
Well, we got to hear the gong. There it is.
We actually came out ahead like 3 minutes on that. I think just even having the clock on this thing has helped us out. Oh, and by the way, Sergeant Slaughter's real name, Bob Remus.
Thank you.
I'm here to
I thought it was G.I. Joe, but that's okay.
Well, no. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Anyways, we are now on to the final segment. Wow, we're actually doing pretty good on time here, so let's try not to muck it up.
And another thing.
What have you got for and another thing this episode, sir?
So during our month and a half sabbatical, my wife and I watched a surprisingly good show called The Diplomat on Netflix. It is starring, let me pull up the cast list here, starring Kerry Russell and Rufus Sewell. It is a story of a kind of a fish out of a water story a little bit, where it is Kerry Russell plays basically someone who has been involved in diplomatic situations for the government, for the U.S. government, who gets thrust into a diplomatic role in the United Kingdom, and there is a tragic event that happens that she is kind of working with the UK on, and it turns into a very well done and well executed political thriller, if you will. Watched the first season, really enjoyed it. Highly would recommend it to folks if you're in the bag for those sorts of kind of shows, more politically and kind of thriller based. I wouldn't call it Born, like a Born Identity sort of thing, but it just has some very interesting kind of twists and turns to it. So if you like mystery, if you like the sort of political thriller type genre, I would highly recommend it, and really strong story overall. So just enjoyed, it's a little bit off the beaten path for the man they call Tim, but I very much enjoyed it and would highly recommend it to our listening audience. So The Diplomat on Netflix. Do check it out.
So
how about you, sir? What is your and another thing?
In addition to penetration and not throwing the balls up, the man they call Tim also very keen on situations where people are thrust into things. So
absolutely,
it's good to know.
Thrusting, penetration, and balls. So you be the judge.
Damn!
Thank you, Ron.
No, God, please, no.
For me, I'm actually the other night I was at a loss for things to watch, and quite honestly, I did not have it in me to start another show or really even get into a story. So I pulled up. I still have my Peacock subscription for some reason. I've not canceled that.
What?
So Vince is still getting 10% of my $6 or whatever I'm paying to NBC.
Yeah. Let me talk to you.
What? My watch says. So I pulled up the Broken Skull sessions, and no new episodes, but I went back and I realized I hadn't watched the Mick Foley episode. And so I got a chance to. Oh, very good, and it's always interesting watching two guys who kind of came up together and were in the business at the same time, talking shop and all that. And I do appreciate how they kind of went through a lot of things. And at this point, I think I've read 2 of Mick Foley's books. I've watched a bunch of interviews. I've even seen bits of his podcast. I went and saw the man do his one-man show, so I feel like I've got pretty good background on this.
Wait.
As far as
don't undersell this. You didn't not only see his show, but you actually got like a bit of like audio that we use in our lead-in to the show.
Well, yeah.
That's all. Yeah, that's all on Uncle Todd. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. Let me talk to you.
Damn!
There we go.
But it was interesting to watch, and it's also interesting to hear his thoughts on on Hell in a Cell, and even getting some. There are a few details in there throughout all of the history of his career that you kind of get in this that didn't come out in other places.
Yeah.
So that was good. Filling in some blanks, and it's good. And Mick Foley's a great storyteller, anyways. So it's just fun to hear him recount bits of his career and all of that. And yeah, I thought it was a great episode, and I would highly recommend it. Even if you're not a huge fan of professional wrestling, like, he is just an interesting cat. And honestly, Stone Cold is a great interviewer. And as far as I think he does a good job of drawing information out while also contributing his own expertise and information as well to kind of fill out stories.
A little snug.
Yep. But I love how when they start talking about the thumbtacks, and he's like, yeah, he mentions like, oh, Steve, we were going to do that. He's like, I don't think we need to do that. Like, Austin was like, I don't think we need to do that. Like, very diplomatically, like, I'm not getting turned into a pincushion. I don't know who you think you're talking to here.
Yeah. To your point, that has always been Foley's, I think, gift and his charm is I think he engages people who don't normally connect with the wrestling product. I think that has always been his strength. Is he's such a sympathetic character. I go back to the late 90s, when you and I were living together and watching Monday Night Raw, and that whole, sequence that played out where Eric Bischoff tried to spoil the whole world title win that he had, and how that completely backfired. It completely backfired because people bought into the underdog story of Mick Foley, and I think that has always been his strength, is the way he engages the audience in a way that other superstars, where you have the Austins, the Rocks, the Cenas, Roman Reigns, Lesnar, there's something obvious there that you try to latch onto, with watching them. But with Foley, he was the guy who was never supposed to have hit the level that he hit. And when he did, you were rooting for him every step of the way. And so that sort of everyman charm that he has is just, it's very unique. It's something that is not, something you can teach or something that can be passed along to someone else. It's just, it has to be part of the person, the human being that goes on the television screen. He just had a very unique, character and a very unique way of presenting himself that struck the audience in a way that I think engaged people who wouldn't normally come to wrestling.
Yeah, very true. And also kind of got into like why, just to dovetail a quick story into that, when he got signed by WWE, and it kind of got signed because, one person was really, Jim Ross was his champion, and Vince McMahon apparently now, and I had never heard this before, Vince was like, all right, I'm going to bring him in, but just so you can see what it feels like to have your heart broken when somebody that you think is going to be great turns out to be squat.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, again, to be that, again, shortchanged at every step, even though he is like a valuable commodity. And it's good to see someone like that kind of
with Undertaker, Rock, and Austin and Triple H.
Yep.
I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better career. You know what I mean? Like someone like him who just is not the stereotypical, body type wrestler, bodybuilding kind of wrestler. And yet he made a career and it had memorable feuds with 4 of the top guys of the 90s into the 2000s. I mean, it's just remarkable. Just remarkable.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. No doubt.
Absolutely.
Highly recommend that episode.
Check it out. Check it out.
And one more time.
Makes you humble.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for bearing with us. Thank you for sticking through with us. We know this is the kickoff to season 4, so maybe we've gained some new listeners here. Welcome to the Free Range Idiocy congregation, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're wondering, like, well, how do I become a part of this congregation? Yes, I want to join this podcasting cult. It's real easy. You just subscribe. That's all you have to do. We make it a real low bar for entry because, quite honestly, if it were any higher, we wouldn't get in.
Pass the collection plate.
Yes. So what you can do to subscribe, you can go to our website, which is www. I don't know why I'm just giving the www anymore. Is that even a thing? Like, do we need to do that anymore?
Are we in the 2000s?
I'm showing my age.
What the
I know,
heck?
like Web 1.0, ladies and gentlemen. But you go to freerangeidiocy.com and you'll be able to see all of our episodes there. You can subscribe right through Podbean or the Podbean app. You can also download the episodes individually. You can also find us on podcast purveyors across the universe, or perhaps even the galaxy, maybe just the world, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever the Amazon one is, Pandora, all of those. Just go ahead and search for Free Range Idiocy. You can also find us on the interwebs and the social media because we love us some us. You can find us at Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. All of those are at Free Range Idiocy. By the way, if you are a loyal member of the Free Range Idiocy congregation, I don't know, I think I said congregation twice there. It's getting late, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a way to rate us, I mean, feel free to give us some 5 stars, 4 stars, hell, even 3 stars. Quite honestly, I'm not proud. I'm an only child. I take whatever attention I can get. The downloads, the ratings, all of that stuff is well appreciated. If you have any thoughts, concerns, any kind of ideas for shows, feel free to send those to Tim at freerangeidiocy.com because he's a caring, empathetic human being, and I really don't care. And that being said, let us now turn this over to the less idiotic member of the duo of idiots on this show, but not before I ask the second most important question ever uttered by human mouth holes. The first, of course, being what is hip. The second, of course, being what the hell did we learn this episode? Anything?
We've learned the following, my friend. That's right. We have learned that even after a month and a half sabbatical, Uncle Todd and the man they call Tim, on point, on game, haven't lost anything. No rust to knock off here.
You're wrong.
We've also learned Uncle Todd has way too much fun with the soundboard. Good
Shut
God.
up, Wesley.
Well, that's
Shut up,
fair.
Wesley.
Yep. Do tell, Captain. We have also learned, Mando season 3. It was pretty good. Maybe didn't live up to some of the overinflated expectations. Guardians of the Galaxy, however, Volume 3, definitely exceeded expectations. We were disappointed by the Celtics, but we will always have a. That's right. They were a punk. Absolutely. But most importantly, definitely got to give props and honor the Iron Sheik, a cultural icon, just a guidepost, if you will, from Uncle Todd and the man they call Tim's youth, and just an over the top character that we have very much enjoyed. So may he rest in peace.
Humble.
Absolutely.
Humble.
Oh, the man was all about humility. Nonetheless, as we like to close things out, we thank you for the listenership. We thank you for the downloads. And as we like to end things here on the range, maybe we'll change it up a little bit and not make it about the electricity or the bill, but rather we're closing up the range for this evening. So as
holy cow, you had me scared there. I thought you were going to retire live on the show. Wait a minute,
no, just changing it up, a little bit. As some fine establishments like to proclaim when they close up shop for the evening. You can't go home, or you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So, nonetheless, we thank you.
You shut off.
That's right. You're done. You suspect. But we thank you again. Retainer. But nonetheless, we thank you. We bid you adieu. And as the Sheik would like to say, if I could cue the soundboard.
You are worse than Hulk Hogan.
Not that one, the one about humble.
Make him humble.
That's right. And so it is said.
I think you've had about enough.
Well, I think you're wrong, you increasingly attractive-looking woman. You know, you're really pretty.
Oh, stop.
No, I'm serious. You could be in magazines. You could. And not just like Jugs or Creamsicle. Call me. She won't call.
I'd like to once again remind our contestants that there are proper bathroom facilities located in the studio.
Oh, here's a pleasant sight. Cirrhosis the Wonder Dog.
I'm not drunk, all right? I just have a speech impediment. And a stomach virus.
In last place, with negative $69. Oh, brother, Sean Connery. Negative $69. Okay, that wasn't your score.
Well, 69 is how I scored with your mother last night.
Let's just move on to the category for Double Jeopardy.
Now get the hell out of here!